Hi everyone, we are going to be looking at some vocabulary and then look at a new story, the Galveston hurricane of 1900. But before we do that, these are going to be some words in the book, and now I want to make sure that we really understand what they mean before we see them in the text. The first word is surge, and this is a surge of water. If there's a sudden large increase in its depth, how deep it is. Like during hurricanes, people used sandbags to protect their homes from a water surge. So here is an example of that. The water surging, rising up. So what might cause like a body of water like a river to surge? I'm thinking like if there was a really big rainstorm, or like it's talking about in this example, a hurricane, that would probably cause some of the water to surge and rise and get deeper. The next word is perished. When people or animals perished, they died. People perished in the hurricane. So we've got some plants here that looks like they've not seen water in a long time. So where might someone have perished of thirst? Where is that more likely to happen? I'm thinking of maybe a desert where there's not any water around for people or animals to get. And the last word we're going to look at is debris. Now, debris is the pieces of something that was broken or it was destroyed. Homes can be destroyed by a hurricane or a tornado, leaving debris scattered all around. So here is a picture of that. So what kind of debris might you find outside of your house after a big windstorm? I know sometimes after storms at my house, I've seen some really big tree limbs that have blown off. Sometimes other people's like yard furniture, maybe some trash cans and trash can lids, things like that. Might be some debris if there were a big windstorm. So next we are going to start thinking about kind of what we're focusing on as we're reading this text, and we are going to work on visualizing this story. We have talked about visualizing before, especially when we were talking about the senses in the last module we were doing. So this text, the Galveston hurricane of 1900, tells the story in kind of two different ways. It is a narrative nonfiction, so it's going to be telling facts kind of in a story format, but it's also going to be a personal narrative, so you're going to know somebody's personal experience with this hurricane. It's not just going to be all facts about this hurricane. So the narrative nonfiction will tell us facts about the storm, and the personal narrative will give us a description by somebody who was actually there experiencing it firsthand. So as you're reading, I want you to be visualizing what's happening. Think about what would you see, what would you smell, what would you hear, what would you be tasting, what would you be feeling. And just think about these things as you're reading to make the story make more sense in your mind and make it easier to picture. So before we start reading our text, just very short, make sure we've got some background knowledge on just what a hurricane is. I'm going to move me over here so you can see all the text. Hurricanes are intense tropical storms. As the storms travel over areas such as the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean Sea, they build up heat and energy from warm ocean waters. These tropical storms are powered by winds over 74 miles per hour. The winds rotate around the eye or center of the hurricane. When hurricanes hit land, they bring heavy rain and strong winds, damaging buildings and land. And then here, this photo shows a hurricane from far above Earth. The eye is visible in the center. That's what that is. So we are going to look at the prepare to read section that is before our text. And before we read it, think about, I used that term narrative nonfiction a few seconds ago, but that just means it's giving factual information by telling a true story about people, places, or events. Personal narratives tell about an important event in a real person's life. So authors of a narrative nonfiction and personal narratives present events in sequential or chronological order. They're happening in the order that they actually happened. in real life. Narrative nonfiction tells about events from the past. Events are told from a second-hand point of view. So it's not a first-hand person who was there. Personal narratives give a first-hand account about the experience. So that is going to use the words like I and we. So before you read, you're going to set a purpose and look at the picture on the next page, and this text describes events that happened in 1900. What do you want to learn about this event? And you're going to put your response here, and here's the picture that it was talking about. So think about what you're wanting to learn about the Galveston hurricane of 1900. Now, we're not going to read this whole entire thing together. You can either do that in your My Book, or you can do that online. But I do want us to go to page 194 just to practice talking about some visualizing things together. And I'm going to go to paragraph 8, and I want to see that illustration as well. So it said in paragraph 8, it says, there were about 15 or 16 in the house besides ourselves. They were confident the house would stand anything. If not for that, we would probably have left on rafts before the house went down. We all gathered in one room. All at once the house went from its foundation, and the water came in waist deep, and we all made a break for the door, but could not get it open. We then smashed out the window, and I led the way. So I'm thinking about all of the things that was telling us, and I'm looking at this picture that's also with this part of the text, and I'm imagining the shock on people's faces as they're seeing the house break apart around them, and the water's rushing in. They're trying to get to the door. They're scrambling. They can't get to it. And I'm thinking about what I'm hearing. The smashing of the wood and the doors coming in, maybe breaking the windows. And I'm visualizing this person trying to lead this group out of this scary situation. And then I'm going to read paragraph 14 as well. I'm going to scroll down so we can see the picture below it. As soon as it was light enough, I went back to the location of the house, and not a sign of it could be found, and not a sign of any house within 2 blocks, where before there was scarcely a vacant lot. So I'm visualizing this person's returning to their house after the storm is over. And I want to focus on that last sentence. There was not any sign of that house or any other house. So I'm imagining maybe the shock on his face of trying to go back to his house and there's not any houses around. And how he's feeling, not being able to find family members. I would be very upset if I was seeing this picture where my house used to be. So that's what we're thinking about as we read this story. Just imagine visualizing what's going on using these different narrative, nonfiction, and personal narrative accounts of this story.